So today I'm talking about a P0172 code, what it is and how you go about fixing it. And so what is a P0172 code? Well, it's a fuel system too rich, bank 1. And what does this mean? Well, basically there's sensors and they're located on the exhaust and they do two things. The first thing they do is they monitor the catalytic converter, but they also monitor the amount of oxygen burnt off after combustion. And then they report this information back to the computer. And for some reason, this sensor, mainly this bank 1 sensor 1 oxygen sensor, is reporting to the computer that the air fuel ratio mixture is off going into bank 1 side of the engine, that there's more fuel going into that side of the engine that should be. And so it's got to be troubleshooted to know why. And when you have a V6 or V8 engine, you're going to have two banks. Bank 1 is always the side of the engine with the number 1 cylinder. So if you find the number 1 cylinder on your engine, then that's going to be bank 1. And then the opposite of that would be bank 2. But with the P0172 code, the computer's seeing an issue with bank 1 side of the engine. If you have a 4-cylinder engine, it wouldn't matter. You'd only have one bank. One thing to note about a P0172 code is it can sometimes be kind of hard to troubleshoot and to fix, since it can be caused by so many different things. And so be sure to keep that in mind. Also, if you're getting any other codes, be sure to pay attention to that because that can help point you to what the problem is. But keep in mind, this code can be hard to troubleshoot sometimes. And so what would be some possible causes of a P0172 code? Well, the first thing that could cause this is a bad O2 sensor, mainly that bank 1 sensor 1 oxygen sensor. It might have just gone bad and be reporting bad information back to the computer. So the computer just thinks there's a problem when there isn't. So you can't go test that sensor and be sure it's working properly, that there's no issues with it. There's some different ways to go about testing that sensor. I made a video on how you can test these sensors. I'll put a link down below if you need to check that out. But the first thing that could cause this is that bank 1 sensor 1 oxygen sensor has just gone bad and needs to be replaced. And the next thing that could cause this is a bad fuel injector on bank 1 side of the engine. If one or more of those fuel injectors has gone bad, then it might be dumping more fuel than should be into a cylinder, which is throwing off the air-fuel ratio mixture that should be going into the cylinders. And so there's a few ways to go about troubleshooting this. First of all, if you're getting any other codes, like for example, you're getting a P0301 code, then this would point you to go look at cylinder number 1 and check out that fuel injector on cylinder number 1, because very likely there's some kind of issue going on there. Another method you could use to see what's going on bank 1 side of the engine is you can remove the spark plugs and check to see how the spark plug is burning inside of there. And then you can match them up to a burn chart and you can see which cylinders are having an issue. For example, when you have a lean condition and there's too much air going into the engine, the tip of the spark plug will often get white. But when you have a rich condition, the tip will become very black because that cylinder is running too rich. So if you could go along and just remove those spark plugs one at a time, and don't get the wires mixed up and just check to see how they're burning, that can help point to which cylinder or cylinders is having the problem on bank 1 side of the engine. So for example, if you remove all the spark plugs on bank 1 side of the engine, and you can see that 3 cylinders are running good, but that cylinder number 1 is running too rich, is having some kind of issue, then you can test the fuel injector on cylinder number 1 and be sure that it's working correctly. Because the next thing that could cause this is a bad fuel injector on bank 1 side of the engine. And the next thing that could cause this is that there's some kind of vacuum leak going on that's causing some kind of issue. And usually a vacuum leak would also affect the bank 2 side of the engine, but sometimes strange things happen. And basically what this means is that all the air going into the engine should be going in through the throttle body. And if air is going around this and it's getting into the engine at some other location, then this can cause issues and cause problems. So you can go through and try to check all the hoses and everything and be sure everything looks like it's good, that nothing's come off or broken or anything like this. So there's a few different methods to try to check for a vacuum leak. One method is use a smoke machine and you feed smoke into the intake. And if you see any smoke come out, then you know you got a leak and you know you need to fix it. Another method to find a vacuum leak that many mechanics use is that they'll get something like starter fluid or something like that. They'll start up the engine and then they'll go along and they'll look, and wherever they think a leak might be, they spray the fluid. And if the engine idle changes, if it goes up, then they know they found the leak and they know what to fix. So there's a few different methods to try to find a vacuum leak, but the next thing that could cause this is a vacuum leak. And there is some other things that can also cause this, but usually when these other things go bad, you're going to get problems with bank 2 side of the engine, which usually means you're going to get like a P0175 code. Although it is possible that something's going on with one of these, sometimes strange things happen, which can just affect one side of the engine. But usually when these next things go bad, it's going to affect the entire engine, not just one side of the engine. And things like this would be something like a bad mass airflow sensor or some type of other sensor has failed. Again, if this happens, you're usually going to get another code like a P0101 or a P0102 or something like that that's pointing to a bad sensor. But it is possible that there's some kind of sensors failed and it's throwing everything off. It's also possible that the air intake is blocked somehow, mainly going to bank 1, but it's a good idea to check the air intake filter and things along these lines. Anything that would block the air from going into the engine, because if anything is blocking the air going into the engine, then that's also going to cause issues. And the next thing on the list is going to be that there's some kind of problem with the fuel pressure going up to the fuel rail. And this is going to be something like a bad fuel pressure regulator or a bad fuel pump or something along these lines. Again, usually this would affect the other side of the engine, but it is possible that there's some kind of issue going on. There's some different ways to go about testing that. If you have a good OBD2 scan tool, you can check to see what the fuel pressure is. You can also use a fuel pressure gauge and attach it up at the fuel rail and check to see what the fuel pressure is and be sure that it's correct, that it's matching what your vehicle should be running at, because it is possible that for some reason the pressure is high at the fuel rail and there's some kind of problem there. So the last thing on the list is going to be a bad fuel pressure regulator or a bad fuel pump. And so that's basically it. I just wanted to give a basic overview of how you go about fixing a vehicle with the P0172 code. If you have anything to add, please comment down below. If you have any questions, ask me and I'll try to answer them. If this video helps you, please click like, please click subscribe, and have a good day.